1876 will commence again.
If you are watching this video, be warned, your nation is under attack. Mindless sheep have swarmed the streets to take part in senseless violence and rioting. They are using force to achieve their objectives, and they mass themselves among peaceful protesters to hide their sinister agenda. They are not looking to simply tear down your statues, they are looking to tear the fabric that holds America together. Christianity, capitalism, freedom, these are all things these savages despise. This may seem like just more craziness from college-age liberals, just more of the kind of unruly behavior you've come to expect from progressives, but there is more at work than sporadic college kids acting defiant. There is a sinister plot at hand. The radical left is moving towards turning our country into a full-blown communist regime, and one of the key players of the movement is Black Lives Matter, whose leaders are self-proclaimed Marxists.
I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
You can see directly on their website they seek to destroy the things America should value most, like family. Their plans are not new. They are just another pawn pushing for the communist and globalist revolution in America. They currently hide their true nature by referring to themselves as socialist, but no matter what they identify as, far-left radicals have been planning to use identity politics to divide our nation for decades. Just listen to G. Edward Griffin brilliantly explain their plot in detail.
The communist program for revolution in America is divided into two phases, violent and nonviolent. But the strategy for violent revolution calls for chaos, anarchy, mass confusion and panic among the people, a crisis in government, and then, out of the vacuum, the sudden seizure of power by communist-led guerrilla bands. The nonviolent phase of revolution actually is more important to the communists and more potentially dangerous to us. Now, the strategy for this phase calls for the gradual transition of our government into a communist regime, done peacefully and legally, but under the banner of socialism. As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. They said in no unmistakable terms that the Negro people, because of their secondary social status and their predominant working class composition, offered greater revolutionary possibilities than any other cross-section of the population. To develop these possibilities, the communists proclaimed that the American Negro constituted a separate nation within a nation, a colony within the continental borders of the United States. The people of this nation were said to be oppressed and exploited by colonialist, imperialist, racist America. Consequently, the Communist Party called for their liberation, their right to self-determination, to break away from the United States and to set up their own nation within our borders. Now, to bring this about, of course, force and violence must be used. A war of national liberation must be fought. And the communists are not stupid. They realize that revolution of force and violence dependent upon a minority is doomed to ultimate failure, except in those areas where they actually do constitute a majority. But they aren't going to settle for just part of the United States. They want all of it. And so they made it clear long ago that their violent war of national liberation must be secondary to the nonviolent proletarian revolution. To take the United States, all of the United States, it'll be necessary, they say, to involve white people as well as black, to create a broad coalition, a revolutionary link between the civil rights movement, organized labor, peace groups, student dissidents, and in general, to escalate the revolution in America from race war to class war.
As the middle class dies in America, tensions are higher than ever. As the disparity of wealth between those rich and poor continues to grow, many citizens have become hopeless, feeling as though the system is rigged, and that even if you work hard, you will not be able to provide your children a better life than they had themselves. They will attempt to exploit this frustration and divide us by wealth. They want a class war, much like that in the French Revolution. The current movement is already eerily similar. Black Lives Matter may currently be the most powerful political organization in the country because it tricks people of all backgrounds into joining thinking they are joining a fight against racism. But what are the actual results when they occupy cities, claiming areas such as Chaz? Once prospering areas of towns become lawless disasters, where warlords behave far more like tyrants than the officers they despise. On top of this, since Black Lives Matter protests began, a massive rate in crimes have increased, particularly black on white crimes, but you are not allowed to make the correlation. You would be deemed a racist and told that the actions of some wrongful African Americans does not reflect their race as a whole, that the majority are peaceful protesters, and rightfully so. That's how it should be. People are not responsible for the actions or endorsements of their supporters, yet the left continually uses this ideological fallacy on those who oppose them. And this leads to the most frightening thing about Black Lives Matter and the mobs of violent socialists flocking to their protest. You cannot criticize them without fear of being subject to defamation. You cannot be against their organization, for if you do, they will claim you do not value black lives and that you are a bigot. You can no longer protect yourself from trespassers. Now, you cannot even claim all lives matter without being potentially murdered. Where does our country go from here? Are we doomed to continue down the path of mob rule? The answer to that question is up to you. For too long, good Americans have remained silent, afraid of what they might be labeled, afraid of what PC liberals may do. The National Maverick will not be silent, for our country is worth the risk. We will not be divided by the color of our skin, and will not be ashamed for our morals, God, or way of life. And neither should you. No longer shall Marxists dictate the fate of our nation. Its fate shall be in the hands of those who are proud to be American. We stand united by our love of this country, not divided by our skin color. Let's end the senseless rioting and looting. Let's stop the deep state and their push for America. Let's extinguish the fires set to burn our systems and place down. Let us take back our country.